Rancher rescued a hanged Apache girl. 20 years later, she returns with an army. The sun was still low when the rancher rode out to check his fence line. Morning air moved slowly across the dry land, carrying the smell of dust and grass. He had lived on that land for many years, long enough to know every sound it made. When something felt wrong, he noticed it right away. That morning, the land felt too quiet. His horse slowed on its own, ears turning forward. The rancher followed its gaze and saw something near a group of old trees by the creek. At first, he thought it was a fallen branch or a torn piece of cloth. But as he moved closer, his chest tightened. It was a young girl, barely more than a child, hanging still and silent. He stopped breathing for a moment. The girl's clothes were torn and dusty. Her hair was tangled, her face pale from pain and exhaustion. There were signs of struggle around the trees, footprints and broken ground that told a clear story without words. Trouble had passed through this place, and it had not been kind. The rancher sat frozen on his horse. He knew who she was. Her features, her clothing, and the marks left behind told him she belonged to the Apache people. And that knowledge brought fear as fast as it brought pity. Helping her would bring danger. If anyone found out, they would call him a traitor. Some would say he deserved punishment. Others would say he invited violence to his land. He had heard all those words before, spoken loudly in town, spoken without care. He told himself to ride away. He told himself this was not his fight, not his responsibility. He was just one man with a small ranch and a simple life. He had already lost too much in the past to take such a risk. But then the girl moved. It was barely noticeable, just a small twitch of her fingers. But it was enough. She was still alive. The rancher climbed down from his horse with shaking hands. He moved slowly, carefully, as if the world itself might break if he rushed. He lifted her gently, cutting the rope with his knife. Her body was light, too light, like someone who had not eaten or rested in a long time. He laid her on the ground and listened. Her breathing was shallow, uneven, but it was there. Life was still holding on. That was the moment everything changed. He wrapped her in his coat and lifted her again, this time with purpose. He did not look back at the trees. He did not think about who might see him. He placed her carefully on his horse and turned toward home. Every step back felt longer than the ride out. His mind raced with fear. What if someone followed him? What if she died before he could help her? What if helping her destroyed everything he had built? Still, he did not stop. When he reached the ranch, he took her inside his small house and locked the door. He laid her on his bed and brought water, cleaning her wounds with hands that were rough but gentle. He spoke softly, even though he did not know if she could hear him. "You're safe," he said, more to himself than to her. "You're safe now." Hours passed. Then night came. The girl drifted in and out of sleep, her body fighting to hold on. Sometimes she cried out in a language he did not understand. Sometimes tears slipped down her face without a sound. The rancher stayed close, changing cloths, bringing water, watching her breathe. He did not sleep. By morning, word had spread in the nearby town that trouble had passed through the land. People whispered about conflict, about punishment, about warning signs. The rancher avoided town. He stayed home, watching the road through his window. The girl finally opened her eyes late that day. Fear filled them immediately. She tried to sit up, then cried out in pain. The rancher stepped back, raising his hands slowly to show he meant no harm. He spoke calmly, carefully. "You're safe here," he said again. "I won't hurt you." She did not understand his words, but she understood his tone. Still, her eyes never left him. Days passed like that. Silence lived between them. He brought food, she ate little. He cleaned her wounds, she watched every movement. Trust did not come easily. It had been taken from her too cruelly. At night, the rancher sat alone at his table, thinking about the past. He remembered a time when he believed the world was simple. He remembered losses he never spoke about. Helping this girl brought those memories back, sharp and heavy. But it also brought something else, purpose. He knew people would not understand his choice. He knew they would judge him without hearing his reasons. Still, each morning when he saw the girl breathing, still alive, he knew he had chosen the only path he could live with. One afternoon, a neighbor rode by unexpectedly. The rancher's heart pounded as he stepped outside, blocking the view of his house. He spoke calmly, acting normal, hiding fear behind simple words. The neighbor left without suspicion. The rancher stood there long after, realizing just how close he had come to losing everything. That night, he made a promise to himself. No matter what came next, he would protect her until she could protect herself. The girl slowly gained strength. She began to sit, then stand, holding onto the wall for support. Her eyes followed the rancher everywhere. She still did not smile. She still did not speak. But she watched, and she learned. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the land in gold, she whispered a word. Just one. Then, her own name. He simply nodded, acknowledging it with respect. He understood that names carried meaning, history, and pain. That simple moment felt heavier than all the danger combined. Outside, the world remained divided by fear and anger. Inside the small ranch house, two broken lives shared quiet space. Neither of them knew what the future held. Neither of them knew how far this single act of mercy would reach. But the choice had already been made. And once mercy is chosen, it cannot be undone. Morning light entered the small ranch house slowly, touching the wooden floor and the plain walls. The girl sat near the window, wrapped in a blanket, watching the land outside. Her body was healing, but her mind stayed alert, always ready. Every sound made her tense. Every shadow caught her eye. The rancher noticed everything, but said little. He had learned that silence could be kinder than questions. Each day, he followed a simple routine. He rose before the sun, fed the animals, checked the water, and repaired what needed fixing. When he returned, he left food within her reach and stepped away to give her space. Trust did not arrive quickly. It had to be built slowly, like a fence made one careful post at a time. At first, the girl spoke only in her own language. The rancher did not understand the words, but he listened. He believed listening mattered more than understanding. Sometimes her voice shook. Sometimes it grew strong. He could tell when memories were pulling at her, and when she was speaking of people she loved and lost. He never asked her to explain. Instead, he showed her the land. When she was strong enough, he walked with her outside, keeping a respectful distance. He showed her where the creek flowed, where the grass stayed green even in dry months, where the horses liked to rest. She watched closely, learning the rhythms of this new place. Work became their shared language. One afternoon, he handed her a small basket and pointed to the garden. He showed her how to pull weeds, how to loosen the soil. She followed his movements, careful and focused. Dirt under her fingers seemed to calm her. It was something real, something that did not lie. As days turned into weeks, small changes appeared. She ate more. She slept longer. Her steps grew steady. The sharp fear in her eyes softened just a little. But pain did not disappear. It waited quietly. At night, she sometimes woke suddenly, breathing fast, her hands clenched. The rancher would hear the sound and sit nearby, not touching her, just letting her know she was not alone. He learned to recognize the signs of fear and to answer them with patience instead of words. The world outside the ranch felt dangerous. Riders passed on distant trails, voices carried on the wind. The rancher kept watch, careful to leave no sign of her presence. He knew how quickly kindness could be twisted into blame. One evening, a storm rolled in without warning. Thunder shook the sky and rain hit the roof hard. The girl curled in on herself, shaken by the noise. The rancher lit a lantern and placed it where she could see it, the warm light cutting through the dark. He sat across the room, steady and calm. After a while, she lifted her head and met his eyes. That, for the first time, she did not look away. That moment mattered. As the rain slowed, she spoke again, saying a few simple words in broken English she had learned from listening. They were quiet words, unsure but honest. "Why help me?" The rancher thought carefully before answering. He wanted to tell the truth, not something easy. "Because someone should have helped you before," he said. She looked down, her fingers tightening around the blanket. She did not respond, but something shifted between them. Days continued to pass. The girl learned more English by listening and repeating. The rancher learned her habits, her silences, the way she watched the horizon as if expecting something to appear. She began helping with the animals. The horses accepted her easily, sensing her calm. The rancher noticed how gentle she was, how careful her movements remained even when she grew stronger. Sometimes they shared meals in silence. Other times, he told simple stories about the land, about seasons and hard years and small victories. He did not speak about fights or anger. He chose stories that carried hope without saying the word. The girl listened closely. One afternoon, she asked him his name. He told her. She repeated it slowly, testing the sound. Then she said it again, stronger this time. Hearing his name spoken by her felt like a bridge being built, plank by plank. But not all days were calm. One morning, smoke rose in the distance. The rancher saw it from the porch and felt a cold weight settle in his chest. Trouble was nearby. He prepared quietly, hiding supplies, planning escape paths if needed. The girl noticed the tension. She stood beside him, looking toward the smoke. Her face showed understanding beyond her years. She had seen signs like that before. That night, she packed her few belongings without being asked. When the rancher noticed, he shook his head. "You stay," he said gently. "This is your home for now." She studied his face, searching for doubt. Finding none, she slowly unpacked. Time shaped them both. The rancher grew less guarded inside his own home. The girl began to laugh once, softly, at something small and unexpected. The sound surprised them both. The rancher smiled, then looked away, giving her privacy even in joy. Still, two worlds lived under one roof. Differences remained. She followed traditions he did not know. He followed routines she did not understand. But instead of clashing, those differences settled into quiet respect. One evening, as the sun sank low, she stood beside him on the porch. The land stretched wide and open before them. She spoke carefully, choosing her words. "You saved my life," she said. He nodded, simple and steady. "You were strong," he replied. "You saved yourself." She considered that, then nodded in return. Neither of them knew what the future would demand. But trust had begun to grow, fragile yet real. And in a world shaped by fear and division, that fragile trust felt like something rare and powerful. Two broken worlds remained under one roof, but instead of breaking each other, they were slowly learning how to stand together. Seasons changed quietly on the ranch. Summer passed into cooler days, and the land slowly turned the color of old gold. The girl was no longer weak. Her steps were strong now, her hands sure in their work. She moved through the ranch as if she belonged there, yet something in her eyes always stayed distant, like she was listening to a call only she could hear. The rancher noticed it. She had grown from a frightened child into a young woman shaped by hardship and patience. She rose early, worked hard, and spoke English with growing ease. She learned the ways of the ranch, but she never forgot who she was. Some evenings, she sat alone, facing the open land, whispering words from her past into the wind. The rancher did not interrupt those moments. He understood that healing did not mean forgetting. One afternoon, trouble came closer than ever before. A group of armed men rode near the ranch, stopping at the edge of the land. Their voices carried clearly in the dry air. They spoke carelessly with anger and suspicion, talking about tribes, about punishment, about teaching lessons. The rancher stayed calm on the outside, but inside, fear rose fast. The girl heard them too. She stood beside the rancher, her face still, her body alert. She knew what such voices meant. She had heard them before, long ago, just before everything was taken from her. That night she did not sleep. Before dawn, she made her choice. The rancher woke to the sound of movement. He stepped outside and found her saddling a horse. She had packed food, water, and the few belongings she owned. Her face was calm, but her eyes were full of quiet strength. "No," he said firmly, "you don't have to go." She turned to face him. "If I stay, they will come again," she said slowly. "They will hurt you. This is your home." She stepped closer. "You gave me life," she said. "I will not repay that by bringing danger to you," he wanted to argue. To protect her the way he always had, but he saw it then. This was not fear pushing her away. It was responsibility. They stood in silence as the sun rose, painting the land in soft light. The rancher felt the weight of every moment they had shared, teaching her to ride, watching her laugh for the first time, seeing trust slowly replace fear. "You are ready," he said finally, though his voice was heavy. She nodded. "I must find my people," she said. "I must know who I am." He handed her a small bundle. Inside were supplies and a simple object he had kept for years, something meaningful from his own past. She held it carefully, understanding the trust behind the gift. They did not embrace. They did not speak more than needed. Some goodbyes were too big for many words. As she rode away, the rancher stood still until she disappeared into the distance. The land felt empty in a way it never had before. Days turned into weeks. The ranch returned to its old quiet rhythm, but something was missing. The rancher moved through his work like a man carrying a shadow. He worried constantly. About her safety. About the world she was returning to. About whether he would ever see her again. He never regretted helping her. Far from the ranch, the young woman faced a harsh road. She traveled carefully, avoiding danger, relying on lessons learned from both worlds. She watched, listened, and waited. When she finally found her people, she was met with doubt and pain. Time had passed. Faces had changed. Trust did not come easily. But she endured. She worked. She listened. She proved herself not with anger, but with strength and patience. She shared what she had learned, blending old ways with new understanding. Slowly, respect followed. Years passed. The rancher aged quietly. His hair turned gray. His hands grew slower, but his heart remained steady. Sometimes he sat on the porch at sunset, watching the land, wondering where she was, what she had become. He never spoke of her in town. He carried her story alone. Far away, the girl became a woman shaped by two worlds. She remembered the rancher's kindness in moments of doubt, his calm voice when fear ruled her nights, his belief that mercy mattered even when the world said otherwise. Those memories guided her. When conflict rose around her people, she spoke for unity instead of destruction. When anger threatened to divide them, she reminded them of the cost of endless pain. She became someone others followed, not because she demanded it, but because she understood suffering. One night she dreamed of the ranch, of open land and quiet mornings. She woke with a clear thought. Debts of mercy should never remain unpaid. She began to prepare, not for revenge, but for protection, for a future where kindness would not be punished. Back on the ranch, the old man looked out across his land as riders appeared on the horizon one evening, too many to count. His heart tightened, memories rushing back. He stood his ground steady as ever. He did not yet know that the choice he made years ago was about to return to him, not as danger, but as something far greater. The path she chose long ago had shaped them both, and now the road between their worlds was leading them back together once more. Years moved forward like a slow river, quiet but unstoppable. The rancher grew older with the land. His mornings began later than they once had, and his steps were not as strong, but his habits stayed the same. He still checked the fence lines. He still watched the sky for signs of change. And every evening, he still stood on the porch, looking toward the horizon, as if waiting for something he could not name. The ranch felt larger and emptier without her. Sometimes he spoke to the animals just to hear her voice. Other times, he sat in silence, letting memories come and go. He remembered the first time she spoke his name, the careful way she learned each task, the strength in her eyes when she chose to leave. Those memories never faded. They lived with him like an old song, soft but always present. People in town aged too. Some moved away. Some were buried. New faces arrived with old ideas. The land changed slowly, but fear and misunderstanding stayed familiar. The rancher kept to himself. He had learned long ago that peace often lived far from crowds. Far beyond the ranch, the girl's life moved through hardship and growth. Her journey back to her people was not simple. The land tested her. Hunger, exhaustion, and uncertainty walked beside her for many days. But she did not turn back. Every step forward felt like a promise she had made to herself. When she reached her people, she found a world both familiar and changed. Elders studied her with careful eyes. Young ones whispered, unsure who she was. Some remembered her name. Others only saw a stranger shaped by time away. She did not demand acceptance. She listened. She worked alongside them, learning again the ways she once knew. She shared what she had learned from the rancher, not as lessons, but as ideas. How patience could calm anger. How planning could save lives. How kindness did not mean weakness. At first, few paid attention, but time has a way of revealing truth. When challenges came, she stayed steady. When fear rose, she spoke calmly. When disagreements threatened unity, she reminded them of shared history and shared pain. Slowly, people began to listen. Respect grew, not loud or sudden, but firm and real. Years passed, and she became someone others sought out, not because she wanted power, but because she carried balance. She understood loss from both sides. She understood that endless fighting only fed more loss. Leadership found her quietly. She trained others to think before acting, to protect rather than destroy. She helped organize defenses that focused on safety, not punishment. She spoke often of the value of land, family, and future generations, and always she remembered the rancher. In quiet moments, she thought of the small house, the steady lantern light, the calm voice that never raised itself in anger. She carried those memories like a guide inside her. When doubt crept in, she asked herself what choice showed mercy without surrender. Back on the ranch, age finally slowed the old man. One winter he fell ill and stayed indoors for weeks. The land outside waited patiently, covered in frost. During those long days, he wondered if his choice, long ago, had mattered beyond that one life. He had no proof, only faith. When spring returned, he walked the land again, slower now, leaning on a stick. He noticed distant changes, more riders passing through, more tension carried on the wind. He sensed the land preparing for something, though he could not say what. Far away, the woman stood before her people, facing a moment of decision. Pressure from outside forces grew stronger. Threats moved closer. Fear whispered that destruction was unavoidable. She chose another path. She spoke of protection instead of attack, of strength through unity, not rage. She reminded them of the cost of losing compassion. Her words carried weight earned over many years. An organized force formed under her guidance. Not an army driven by hate, but a group committed to defense and justice. They trained carefully, they planned routes and signals, they prepared to stand firm without crossing into cruelty. As the years lined up behind her, she knew one thing clearly. She had unfinished business. The debt she carried was not of blood or anger. It was a debt of mercy, a life saved without demand for reward. When reports reached her of growing danger near the ranch lands, her decision was immediate. She gathered her people and spoke plainly. "There is a place," she said, "where kindness was shown when the world was unkind. That place must not fall." Many had heard pieces of her story. Now they understood its heart. The journey back took time. The land stretched wide, just as she remembered. Each mile brought memories rushing forward. The smell of grass, the sound of wind through trees, the shape of hills she once watched from a porch. Back at the ranch, the old man saw signs before he saw people. Tracks in the dirt. Movement far off. His heart grew heavy. He prepared as best he could, believing danger had finally come for him. He stood firm, just as he always had. He did not know that the girl he saved had grown into someone strong enough to shape the future. He did not know that her path had been guided by the same mercy he once showed her. Time had done its quiet work on both of them. It had taken strength and replaced it with wisdom. It had taken fear and shaped it into understanding. And now, as the distance between past and present narrowed, everything they had endured was about to meet at the same place where it all began, not as an ending shaped by violence, but as proof that one small choice can echo across generations